So thank you all for coming. My name is Serena, and I would like to introduce Pete here.
Hello everyone.
Hello. Hi.
So I met Pete just over a year ago in Portugal. I was travelling around the world making films of different communities, and I stumbled across the Awakened Life project, which is Pete's community. And I was there, I think, just over 2 weeks and made a half-an-hour film for him and fell in love with this project. Really inspiring. I visited a year later, so about a month
That was
ago.
in August, September?
August. Just to check in. I was passing by and I thought I'd say hey, and yeah, Pete said he was coming to India, and I'm a newcomer here in Auroville, so I thought, you're coming to Chennai, come to Auroville, let's do this.
So here I am.
Yeah, so here he is, he just arrived today, and the really inspiring thing, good connection is Shira Aurobindo has been a great spiritual teacher for Pete, and this is kind of how all this has come into play. So this is why he would like to speak with you guys about it today. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Serena. Yeah, so as Serena said, I was already planning to come to India, and I was actually planning to come and visit Auroville and Sri Aurobindo Ashram, but I wasn't expecting this, so this is a bonus to be able to spend this time with you all and share some of my experience on what we're doing with our project in Portugal. So the project we have in Portugal is called the Awaken Life Project, and if any of you are curious to find out more about it, we'll watch in a little while the short documentary that Serena made when she came, which really does convey, I think, the essence of what we're doing. And we also have a website, awakenlifeproject.org, and you can find out a lot of information there. So meditation, you find it at the core of every authentic spiritual tradition path. Even in the Western monotheistic religions, Christianity, Islam, when you look at the people who are really doing it, the Christian mystics, for example, their prayer was essentially meditation, because in true prayer, the separate individual who is praying to God out there dissolves and disappears. So it's when the apparently separate individual self dissolves into the infinite, to the whole. This is really what meditation means. And it's always accessible right now. Now. No past, no future. So I could distill all of my instruction about meditation, and meditation is probably my deepest passion in life. Not only is it the foundation of our project, but I teach meditation retreats. And it's one of the things that we're offering to people who come. And I'm very passionate about making meditation simple and accessible, and free from a lot of the cultural baggage, and the Eastern terminology. And I could distill everything I've learned about meditation in 30 years of meditating down to one line, which is to let everything be exactly as it is. You can't get more simple. But what you'll probably find is, the ego, the part of ourselves that's usually very attached to wanting things to be a certain way, finds it very challenging. See? So Maybe some of you are meditating already, and if some of you feel inspired to give yourself to a regular practice, just remember that. You just sit down for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, or an hour, however long, 3 hours, and you let everything be as it is. And I guarantee that sooner or later, eventually, you will begin to experience inherent happiness, freedom, bliss, infinite space. I just wanted to share with you a little bit more about the spiritual context or philosophy behind the Awakened Life Project. And this is where it really connects very much with the work of Shira Bindo and also the mother, although I don't know so much about the mother, I know more about Shira Bindo. So let me explain why. In fact, a big part of my journey here in South India is really about honouring and embracing the different streams, you could say, of wisdom or spirituality that have had the deepest influence on myself and my own awakening. And those two streams of wisdom we can see represented in this area of India. One in the form of Ramana, in Ramana Ashram, and one in the form of Shira Bindo and the mother, and potentially what's manifesting here in Auroville. So obviously both Sri Ramana Maharshi and Shira Bindo were extraordinarily profound, awakened human beings. They both lived at roughly the same time, interestingly. I think they both died around the same time, around 1950, or they left their physical body. And they knew of each other's work, but they never actually met. So why is that so interesting? Just to use those two examples and what they represent. It's that someone like Sri Aurobindo or the Buddha, there are many other teachers who could be examples of this, were great mystics who realized their true nature as consciousness itself, as God, as spirit, whatever, as Brahman, as they say in India. So as I was guiding us all into in the meditation, it's when we let go of identification with body, mind, with all of our psychological experience, which is usually like this, right? Usually our psychological experience is all we can see. How are you today? I'm up, I'm down, I've got this problem, that problem, right? We're usually embedded in a very contracted, self-focused, separate psychological bubble, we could say. This is what the ego is. So I love to use that word ego to signify ego, edging God out. Mm-hmm. So the ego in us, this deeply conditioned momentum, belief and activity of being convinced that we're a separate psychological entity, is that movement, that contraction that pushes God or consciousness or our awareness of our true nature out. But in reality, it isn't out, it doesn't go anywhere, it's always here. We're just not aware of it because we're too busy focused on our narcissism, on all our petty fears and desires and problems and challenges. So the perennial path to enlightenment or awakening has been about letting go of that contraction of awakening to the one, or that consciousness that exists, that always exists prior to that contraction. So that consciousness, that Brahman, whatever we want to call it, always is. It's right here, right now. It's your fundamental experience of I. If you just be right now, there's an experience of I am, right? I amness. Now, before you identify with this body, this is me. Before you identify with an emotion, before you identify with a thought, there is only I am. And that I am includes everything, doesn't it? My I am includes all of you right now. You're all appearing within my consciousness of I am. There is no separation. Unless I insist that no, I am this body. I am this mind. I am my personal history. I'm completely different from you. You could never know who I am or understand me. You see? This is kind of the illusion of human ignorance. So usually it takes a long time of getting to know each other for people even to begin to really trust each other. And even then, how deep does it go? So if we want to discover profound trust, intimacy, communion, love, true love, spiritual love, we have to awaken to this deeper part of ourselves. You see? Because that deeper part of ourselves is already one. We're already together there. You don't have to learn all about me and my personal history, and I don't have to learn all about you and your personal history to be together. We can realize that oneness. And then potentially, we'll find out more about all of our unique individuality. But the ground that we can meet in is this prior unity, this prior trust that we're always already free. We're always already full and complete. So that's the foundation. So that's the perennial discovery of what's been called enlightenment or spiritual awakening. And I've represented it here on this model by the blue area, which is the discovery of being, pure being, eternity. Eternity. Because pure being or pure consciousness is outside of time. It's always now. So your fundamental experience of I is always now, isn't it? Where is the past? Where is it? It doesn't exist. The past only exists or appears to exist as memory. And where does memory appear? Right now. Right? Memory is just like a photo in a photo album. It's not the real thing, of course. It's an impression of something that happened in the past. But if we think of the past, if we remember the past, it's always right now. Do you get it? There is no past. Same with the future. Where is it? If we're thinking or imagining what may be in the future, it's all happening now. So there's a stream of time apparently, happening in this created universe. The body appears to be aging. We appear to be changing and growing and hopefully evolving. So this is a world of change, of transformation. But the I, the fundamental, pure experience of I that always is, never changes. always is. When you go to sleep at night and then you dream, right, you completely lose awareness of this body. You become other bodies or many bodies and you live in other worlds. But who is the dreamer? It's the same I that is awake in the waking state. When you go into deep sleep, there is no awareness of this body, no awareness of anything, no thought, no psychological experience. You disappear. You absolutely disappear. We all disappear for 30% roughly of our existence. But we don't wake up in the morning, do we, going, oh my shit, oh my God, I completely disappeared. What does this mean? Right? We're like, no, oh, I slept so well. You see? But then we wake up in the morning and, you know, it all happens pretty quickly. But it's like we lock into this kind of psychological drama of me, this separate body mind. And the ongoing soap opera or adventure of me and my life, you see? That's the illusion. That's the illusion that the ego creates. So this blue area represents the discovering of being, of eternity, that our true being, it transcends all changes and all time. And the fundamental experiential quality of this discovery of our true self is peace. Profound, deep peace. Aren't we all longing for profound and deep peace? Everybody longs for that. If you go and meditate in Ramana's cave, you'll be overwhelmed by a peace that's beyond anything you can imagine. Deep, 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 penetrating peace. So the more we go into the ground of being, of our true self, the more we discover peace and freedom from everything. Freedom from everything. And this is the discovery of transcendence. Transcending everything. Transcending the world. Transcending the body. Transcending the mind. This is where we discover true peace. Timeless peace. You with me? And in that discovery, to the degree that we become grounded there, we recognize that everything is already perfect. Everything. Not just some things, but everything is already perfect. That means even all the cruelty, suffering, injustice, everything that's apparently wrong with this crazy human world, it's all perfect. It all is as it is. It couldn't be any other way. It doesn't mean that we just leave it at that, but it means that we discover a peace, you see, with things as they are. Right, so traditionally, you know, in most the Eastern kind of wisdom, the wisdom that's come to us from the East, from India especially, it's all about this journey into transcendence. But then there's another dimension to spirit, to consciousness, to God, that comes out of that emptiness, that deep peace, that transcendence. And this is what Sri Aurobindo was very interested in, very concerned about. What's so interesting about Sri Aurobindo is he was an Indian who had a very deep education in the West, and he was a brilliant man. You know, he was, I don't know if if you're all aware, he was the most dangerous man in India, according to the British. He was one of the original inspirations for the independence movement in India. He really laid the ground for Gandhi. It's not very well known. So he was somebody who cared passionately about this world and about justice and about creating a better world. And then he was imprisoned. There was a few other experiences that he had, but he was imprisoned by the British, and basically he began to undergo a kind of spiritual transformation. And this led him to decide, once he got out of jail, to dedicate his life to what became known as the integral yoga, to a spiritual vision and transformation that would embrace both the absolute, transcendent, already free truth of who we really are, and be a force of creation, of bringing a new world, a new human being into human existence. So Sri Aurobindo was like a figure that straddled east and west, and that's why I think he's so significant, is because he was somebody who embraced the wisdom of the East, which is the path of transcendence, and also embraced, you could say, the wisdom of the West, which is the path of transformation, which has very much to do with the sense of a creative impulse that's moving through time, the sense of evolution, the sense of some kind of progression. Right? So that's really been an understanding, a contribution that's come out of the West, both through science, obviously, but through much more than that. Western philosophy, the Western kind of mode of thinking about the purpose and significance of life. It's been very much about salvation. It's been very much about utopia. It's been very much about bringing heaven to earth. Okay? And in the more Eastern kind of orientation, it's about getting off the wheel of birth and death. It's of getting out of here, letting go of this creation, and discovering freedom through transcendence. Do you see? You see how there's two different orientations there. So, in the orange part of the model, what that represents is the part of you that is passionate about change, that cares very deeply about life, about what's possible. It's really what love is, because we can discover deep peace in meditation, and there are many places you can go. Monasteries, ashrams, for example, where people are discovering and resting in a very deep peace. And of course, if there's an authentic discovery of true peace, there's going to be an expression of love. There's going to be a recognition that myself is yourself. Right? But then some of us, for whatever reason, and I think more these days, especially Westerners, are feeling that that's not enough. That there's a greater love or a greater passion that calls us to something more, something greater than just the discovery of our own peace, than just the discovery of our own personal liberation. And what is that passion? It's the passion to create and to bring into manifestation what we could call heaven on earth, or whatever the highest evolutionary possibility is for human beings, to actually bring it into manifestation. When you awaken to that, when you give yourself to that, you become one with the process of becoming. Right? So there's being, which is unmoving, static Brahman. Aurobindo called it the static Brahman. And then there's becoming, the creative impulse, which is the dynamic Brahman, which is Shakti. So the Shiva Shakti, the life force, the creation. And all of this is one. It's not two. That's why I've called this model, there's two faces, but really it's one coin. You cannot separate them. That's why I have them in this yin and yang model. You cannot separate them. But if you only have one, if you only give yourself to one without the other, we don't realize the fullness of who we can potentially be as human beings. And there are many people in the West, particularly, who resonate with the creative, spiritual impulse, who are very concerned about what's happening with the planet, about evolutionary crisis, who want to do, who want to change, who want to make things happen. But because they are not grounded in and are spiritually awakened to this dimension where they recognize that everything is already perfect, already full, so many of these efforts fundamentally end up being frustrated, or they end in conflict or failure. Because the ego, you see, is ultimately tends to be the one who is trying to do it, who is trying to change the world. You see, so if the ego, if it's coming from there, we are moving from a place of fundamental problem, of fundamental frustration, of fundamental dilemma. And of course, no matter how much we do, no matter how much we achieve in creating a better world, human ignorance being what it is, we're only going to have so much of an impact. So if we're attached to the results, to having certain results from our actions, we won't be free. You see, we might give a lot, create something, and then when it doesn't succeed in the way that we want or desire, or we feel helpless and despairing because there's just still so much madness and destruction going on, then we will lose our inspiration, we will lose our happiness, we will lose our freedom, and we will become cynical, despairing. I've known many people like this. I've known many people who were sincere activists, passionate people who gave many years of their lives, to some kind of cause, to helping people. But then they end up burning out because they're not grounded, they haven't spiritually awakened. You see? And what we need is spiritual activism. We need to embrace both the timeless, already free dimension of who we are and our evolutionary mission, you could say, or our obligation to dedicate ourselves to the transformation of this world. So you see, there's the paradox: transcendence and transformation. Everything is already perfect, and everything must change, including you. Including you. That's the great paradox. The mind cannot get it, the mind cannot grasp it. Only the spiritual heart can hold that paradox. But if we can find the bigness of heart, the humility, the courage, the strength to live with that paradox, we can live an extraordinary life. We will be able to do what we never imagined could be done. We will be able to say what we never imagined we could say. Magic will happen. Miracles can happen. Auroville is a good example. Look, this came from a vision. Everything comes from a vision. Everything that is the seed of spirit coming into this world comes from a vision, from this creative impulse. You see? So, in terms of how we live the whole picture here, so as I've shared with you quite a bit about meditation, which is all about strengthening that grounding in transcendence, in that already free place. So how do we give expression to the active Brahman, the dynamic face of spirit, the evolutionary impulse, the passion for creativity and change? It's through communication, it's through inquiry, it's through coming together. So a big part of what we work with at the Awaken Life Project is something called Awaken Communication. And basically what Awaken Communication means is learning how to come together, to communicate, to have friction, to deal with conflict, free from the ego. It's a very big deal. It's a very challenging process, but it's absolutely worth it. But it's only possible when we discover a ground of trust in ourselves and in each other that is unshakable. So that means we come together in a commitment that we are one and we will not divide. And it also means that we will all become interested in freeing ourselves from the activity of ego consciousness. Now usually when we think about all of our issues and all of the stuff, our stuff that we have to deal with, it usually feels very personal. My stuff, my past, my issues. It usually feels very personal to us. But the truth is that it's not personal at all. It's not personal at all. So just as who we are as one consciousness is one, the human ego, or this conditioning that is the seed and the cause of all of our suffering and unhappiness and all the problems in the world, is also impersonal. It's not unique to me or to you. So when we discover the trust to actually begin to explore that, to put it on the table, so to speak, and with transparency, with humility, so that everybody else can see it. And we start to look at my ego, your stuff, my stuff. And we start to look at everything that separates and limits us together. From a place of prior unity, we start to break it down. We start to deconstruct it. You see? We start to realize that it's not me, it's not you. We can go beyond this. This is the only way that we can truly create a new human culture. Because the seed of all human conflict and suffering, and the seed of the evolutionary crisis that we're in as a race, is a crisis of trust. It's a crisis of trust. Human beings don't trust each other deeply, deeply. It's the only way that we can go beyond conflict is if we discover and we have faith in this deepest dimension, which is always untouched by any conflict, any pain, anything that has ever happened in this world. Do you see? So if we have faith and conviction in that, if we're interested in that, then that gives us the courage and the humility to go through anything together. To go through anything together. So as somebody said, I don't know if they're still here at the beginning, but most communities, most intentional communities, most eco-villages, or as someone recently said to me, most ego villages, because he said the same thing as this person said at the beginning, that he'd been to all these eco-villages, and they all sound fantastic, and they're doing their permaculture and their straw bale building and healthy living and all of that, but most of the time you'll find the same ego consciousness. At work, at play. So what tends to happen is a lot of places that people have come together around a certain ideal, shared ideals, to create a better world, a better environment. But often they still end up living very separate lives. You know, it becomes kind of like a nice neighborhood, an alternative neighborhood, yeah? So much better in so many ways than the norm. But when it comes down to human being and human relationships, we're often coming up against the same conflicts, problems, and it breaks down. So often it breaks down. I read a study recently that since the 1960s, so since the hippie revolution and the coming of Eastern spirituality to the West, around 97% of communities, of intentional projects, experiments have failed. This is why. I mean, maybe not in every case, but usually it's because there is not a shared vision, understanding, commitment to the transcendence of ego, and an understanding of what the ego is. And what I want to say, just one other thing about this, is that what I'm calling the ego is not a problem. Usually when we think of the ego and all the misery and pain that it creates in the world, we think, well, of course it's a problem. A terrible problem. And of course, from a certain point of view, it is. It is that force of fundamental self-interest, of me first. Right? That is the cause of all the greed, injustice, wars. So from a certain point of view, it's a big problem. But when we're actually wanting to confront it, when we're wanting to transcend it, if we're grounded, if we give ourselves to this discovery of our prior unity, we'll be able to see that it's not who we really are, you see. And then we start to have humility that, look, I'm a conditioned human being, you know. Some of us had a really rough time, you know. Some of us have all kinds of psychological wounds and traumas from our upbringing. Some people have had an easier time. But regardless of whether we've had a difficult or an easier time, we're all deeply conditioned to be convinced that we are separate. We are limited. So the fact that that is the case is not a problem. It's just where we're at as a human species in the evolutionary process right now. And this is the vision that Aurobindo had. He said that human being, as we commonly experience it right now, is a transitional species. We are not the end. You see, we tend to think, well, as far as we know, as far as science has revealed, and I have no idea how true it is, but as far as we know, you know, there's been billions or millions of years of biological adaptation, and you know, we have the traces of the fish and the reptile. We have a reptilian brain here, a mammalian brain, right? We embody millions of years of cosmic evolution. Cosmic also, stardust, right? It's all in us, it's all in our form here. But we tend to we don't even really think about it as human beings. We're just like, whoa, but here we are, 15 billion years later. This is it. But maybe we're just getting started. Maybe this is just a stage on the way to a much higher expression of what it could mean to be a human being and be a human being together. So one of the reasons I'm deeply passionate about this work is that through my own journey, which has been over the course of about 30 years, I've dedicated my whole adult life to the discovery of human awakening and higher human potentials. And the most extraordinary and powerful and revolutionary thing that I've discovered is that what our potential is as humanity, as a human race, is that we as individuals all become cells in a greater being. So just as atoms come together to form a molecule, molecules come together to form a cell. Right? So when hydrogen and oxygen come together, right, two gases, something happened that never happened before, and suddenly there's water. You could never predict, if oxygen was down here and hydrogen, they're going, well, where are we going to go next? Yeah, there's something called water, right? No way to know, you see. But all there was an evolutionary impulse, or some kind of creative impulse that's bringing, in this case, hydrogen and oxygen together, and then through some kind of evolutionary emergence or magic, something completely new comes into being. So it's my conviction that what we're facing at this time in human history is such a crisis point or bifurcation point. I think many of us sensitive, intelligent human beings, we're actually waking up to the truth that we're receiving a message from consciousness, from life, which is wake up and evolve or die. Right? I think if we're honest, we all know that's the message of our tipping point times. That's what we have to let in. That's what we have to bear if we're willing to face everything and avoid nothing. For the first time in human history, we have the power to destroy ourselves. Not necessarily because we're worse or than humans were in the past, but because there's so many of us, because our technology is so vast, so potentially positive, yet so destructive. And of course we're all locked, a human civilization is still locked into this kind of juggernaut of consumption, right? Of endless consumption, of the fulfillment of desire. And that's what's obviously destroying our planet and destroying human society in so many ways. So the call from consciousness, I believe, for those of us who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, is not only to awaken, not only to transcend, not only to free ourselves from all of this, but to come together. To come together, to give this human vehicle to the creation of the higher evolutionary potential of humanity. Now, when we come together as human beings, passionately and sincerely, with that intention, if we really want to give our lives to that, then something starts to happen that's similar to the molecules becoming a cell. Then these cells, these individual, autonomous, sensitive, intelligent human cells, we allow ourselves to become a vehicle for the life divine, for the descent, as Aurobindo called it, of the supermind. I have no doubt in my own experience this is true, this is real. It's a human potential that's vibrating in our midst. It's longing to come into manifestation. And the supermind that I'm speaking about is a collective awakening. It is not only an individual awakening. It is when awakening individuals come together and then a collective consciousness can start to come into being. That is the next step in our evolution as a species. And in that consciousness, not only is it obvious that I am you and you are me. Right? There's one self, one life looking out through all our eyes right now. Not only is that obvious, but these vehicles here, our body and mind, our sensitivity, our intelligence, everything we have becomes a cell in this greater being that wants to come into manifestation. So then when you would think of the concept of a human being or a human becoming, you wouldn't just think of an individual, you would see it as the collective. But you see, it's a collective in which our individuality flowers and shines. It's a collective that does not suppress the individual. You see? It's a collective awakening that releases the full potential of our individuality. And I love the word individuality because what does it mean? It means indivisible. So the ego is not your individuality. The ego is the illusion that I am separate from life and consciousness. When we let go of the illusion of ego, we uncover our individuality, which is an individual, unique expression of that which is indivisible. Then we will all be shining and we will all be very different. Right? We'll all be different flowers, different fragrance in the field. And yet, we will look in each other's eyes and we will see one self, one source through which all of this is being animated, through which everything is being released. And as far as I can see, as far as I can intuit, that is the direction of the fulfillment of our human being and our human becoming on planet Earth. And you see, I want to say one last thing, when we give ourselves to this, you see, we see our human life in this form, in this time, in this birth, as part of a great continuum. In other words, we're not attached to gaining any specific result in the time of this body. We don't know. We don't know what's possible. All we're interested in is giving everything that we can. You know? Then you're free. Then you're not holding back. Then when you're on your deathbed, you have no regrets. Because let's face it, when most people confront death, there's a lot of regrets. People realize they've been holding on. And then what happens? Then we're reborn with that again. That's how it works. Whatever we're holding on to in this life, you'll hold on to in the next life. You'll have to learn the same lessons. You see? So you might as well do it now. If you really get it, if you really understand it, you'll realize, oh my God, there's no time to waste. Am I willing to let go of my psychological suffering, my unhappiness? Am I willing to see that I am the cause of my unhappiness? It's only the ego that blames, no. It's because of him, the system. How can I be happy? You'll never free yourself that way. So when we let go, when we give ourselves to this purpose, we let go of needing to have or experience any particular result. Because we're giving ourselves to life and consciousness itself, which far transcends this individual human life. Do you see? It's very liberating. So, and then at the top of the picture there, you see I have a spiral. So the reason I like the spiral is, to me, it's the symbol of these two faces of spirit coming together as one. Because in the being traditions, in the more Eastern Indian understanding, life, creation is cyclical. It's just going round and round. It's the wheel of birth and death. It's going nowhere. There's no purpose. There's no progression. We want to free ourselves from it. And in the West, it tends to be the line. It tends to be linear, like an arrow, time's arrow. That no, things can get better. Things can improve. We can progress. We are going somewhere. This has only existed in the West since the Renaissance, really. In medieval times, it was still very cyclical. But then in the Renaissance, for many reasons, science, the awakening of individuality, rational thinking, there was suddenly this sense of, no, life can get better. I can be the author of my life. This is very recent in human history. But, as we can see, when you have that awakening without the awakening to the interconnectedness with the whole, well, it leads to a lot of delusion and destruction. So the spiral is the symbol that brings them together, you see. There's the cyclical dimension of creation and life in the universe, of being. And then there's this sense of some kind of something, and I don't really know what it is. We can call it evolution, we can call it a creative impulse. But it's whatever that is in us that wants to create a better world, that cares, that's going somewhere. So that's really what we're giving ourselves to at the Awaken Life Project. The reason it's working, the reason people are transforming, the reason that we experience an extraordinary degree of happiness, ecstasy and joy, and the reason that we also experience very deep challenges, because we are not afraid to confront the ego and challenges. But the reason that we find that we go through them, most of the time, we don't succeed always, and some people are not willing to go through it. But what makes it possible is this vision and this commitment that I'm sharing with you, which I believe was fundamentally the vision of Shira, Bindo and the Mother. But from what I've heard, and I'm not assuming anything, but from what I've heard is that vision is not very alive here in the way it could be. It's alive as an ideal, I mean, Auroville obviously represents an incredible ideal, and there's a lot of extraordinary work going on here, which I'm very interested in finding out about. But in terms of the potential of people coming together in this deep spiritual unity and living that unity, from what I've heard, there are people who are interested in this, and I think there's a lot more that could happen in that domain.